The crowning glory of the Sweetest Summer Festival, our crop over, is Grand Kadooment. It's when you see adult masquerading at its best, with locals and visitors alike converging on the streets in their costumes. But times are changing, and we're seeing the evolution of these costumes, from the big ones that feature a lot of cloth and depicting various themes, to the small sparkly numbers, yes, with those beads and gems and feathers. Hi, I'm Stacey Russell, and in this crop over edition of NewsPULSE, we're asking the question: how can we make our crop over, our Grand Kadooment, stand out and be unique amongst all the other carnival-like festivals? And what makes business sense? For even the youngest, today's costumes are trending towards glamour, certainly moving away from youngsters of the 1970s, like our own Peter Wickham, once playing mass with his sister, he in a Banks Bear costume. Grown-up Peter, now broadcaster and political analyst, is still masquerading. He agrees with current chairman of the National Cultural Foundation, or NCF, Dr. Jasmine Babb, on moving with the times of pretty, sparkly, showy appeal. She too a dedicated masquerader from her youth. But not so fast. Of course, the designers, the artisans, the creatives, the entrepreneurs involved in the masquerade business are weighing in. Betty West and Trevor Chase, two Barbadian masters in masquerade costume designing, both awarded just weeks ago with the Crop Over Stalwart Award, are definitely confirming change.
The concept of crop over has changed from when I first started and was acquainted with other band leaders. I think what's happened is that we've transitioned into a more modern mass. Like everything else evolves. So this is a situation where the heritage, or what we call the old type of costuming, is, I would say, on its way out. And that is because we have made adjustments in what the persons producing crop over has done. And by doing that, certain elements of crop over are no longer relevant to what I was accustomed to.
The concern is, how will Grand Kadooment costume designs unfold under the charge of this young generation?
We're the older ones are in it for the love of it, but they're like where business is concerned. So we won't find too much young people getting into this. What we're doing, creating and having sleepless nights, going without, food or whatever to make sure the production is in order.
Band leader of Power by 4, Chetwin Stewart, is trying for a triple win, a good mix of traditional and party costumes, more Barbadians playing mass, and profits from the jump up.
There's two types of mass, all traditional and then the contemporary, all can be the same. But you have to have band leaders. A lot of the bands that are brought now are not really brought by band leaders, they're brought by business people. It's not a traditional band leader who, is here right through and building a set of people and a big committee and having them going out there and working. A lot of it now is just a matter of putting the product out there and people see the product on social media and come and jump. So what's happened over the years now is that a lot of the younger people coming up, they don't see the need or anything, get on the road in the costume. And I think we have to get more young people back into it, designing and bringing bands and having large committees and stuff. But the thing with the next generation is that they're not foolish. If it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense.
Beige International's band leader Richard Haynes says moving away from traditional costumes is beneficial.
If you want to compete in any creative space, you have to evolve with time. Yes, Beige is a party band, but the party bands have become the more dominant bands these days. And in our humble opinion, if you have a successful band, it's not just about having fun on the road, but it's about appealing to foreigners, to people that come to Barbados to complement our economy, to put heads in beds at the ultimate end of the day. And when you look at the modern type party bands, they attract a few thousand visitors to Barbados just by their efforts alone.
Brian Worrell, leading Colors Entertainment, believes change is inevitable.
Even traditional costumes have kind of trended towards, more revealing costumes, etc. So most of the themes for the traditional costumes also have been played over and over and over again. So finding new ideas for traditional costumes is going to be hard. But commercially, if you're doing this commercially, you got to be looking outside of Barbados for people to be interested. It's hard to sell traditional costumes to overseas market. Based on percentages of people that jump in Barbados, you're getting more of a higher percentage of overseas revelers than local revelers. So that's why it's trending towards, the party type costumes rather than the traditional costumes that we were familiar with back in the day.
Reflecting on their history, Raymond and Sheila Gill, band leader and designer of Blue Box Card, say certain costumes have long gone.
In the beginning, it was a yard of cloth and a theme, and you made your own costume, which is something we still look at, but that got some very creative costumes came out of that. It's a matter of finding how to fit that in with a band now.
Dr. Bob, as chairman of the NCF, the producers of the entire Crop Over Festival, is being candid, bearing out what band leaders are saying.
The heritage costumes are not selling as quickly as the modern feathered gemstone costumes. And I think what we have to realize is that everything evolves and culture evolves. We now live in a world where globalization has taken over everything. It used to be TV and travel. Now it is social media. So all of the young people who will play mass and take part in Kadooment, they know what's happening in Trinidad, they know what's happening in Brazil, they know what's happening in all of these other locations where there are masquerades. And they want to obviously have similar styled costumes to what are out there. So while I understand that we have to kind of safeguard and showcase our heritage costumes, we have to also be cognizant and aware and ask ourselves, well, what are the masqueraders? What do they want to wear? And when you think of it, if we come locally, there are not many people, certainly my age, who play masks anymore. They're either not willing or they're not able, or both. And so it is that generation, I would say between 20 to maybe 40 is the majority of those who are going to play masks. And you ask yourself, and we know this because when the bands launched, we ended up with 2 traditional bands bringing traditional costumes. Small bands, maybe 150. A majority of the bands are the party type bands with the feathers and the gems and so on. One of those bands with 800 persons sold out in a couple of weeks. So what does that say to you? Obviously, there has to be a demand for the particular costume that you're going to design and put out there. Because at the end of the day, it's still a business venture.
She speaks not only as NCF chair, but from long personal devotion to Grand Kadooment.
I've been doing this from the beginning. I think it was somewhere in the 70s. I designed a band for Banks Breweries called Phases of Crop Time, and they won Best Band in that year. And that band had what we call traditional costumes. I guess we will get to that, where we had the phases of crop time. So we had sugar, we had white sugar, brown sugar, and we had molasses, we had cane fire, section with cane fire, a section with molasses. We had the byproducts as well. So that it was quite interesting. They had a section with the fire and the smoke. Actually, my costume was actually back in the day, the smoke, and where we used cotton wool to do the smoke and sprayed and so on. And back in those days, the traditional costumes used more material and plastic and, type of, not the gems and the more feathers and so on like we use in these costumes today.
Avid masquerader Peter, the political analyst, has an analysis for our Grand Kadooment costume designs.
Because I find that some of the voices that shout loudest in terms of preservation of our heritage are not the voices that will pay to have that heritage maintained. And I think in a lot of these things we have to appreciate there's a cost. The aspects of our crop over which have survived and done best are the aspects that are commercially viable. And sadly, a lot of those aspects are not the traditional aspects. So if you look at the donkey cart parade, to me that was one of the most unique aspects of our crop over festival. And that's gone. It's gone because they're no longer donkeys and persons with carts in large numbers to be able to, demonstrate that aspect of our culture.
Just like financially supporting modern designs, the NCF is ensuring the preservation of traditional costumes.
We are supporting all of the costume bands. And I don't want to say what is the quantum of this support, but we have given support to all of the costume bands. They then decide what design, whether it is in the heritage category or it is in the new feathered and gems type category, that they will bring a costume. I think for them, they will then decide and they will know what is the demand for one or the other. In terms of a policy, we are supporting a costume designer to put on a heritage band and to allow persons to have a costume in that particular band with the heritage type characters that we have at a nominal cost to that person who wants to play.
The NCF chair is adamant that market forces determine the designs.
We can't drive all of the costume bands and say to them and dictate to them what they should have as a costume.
Do you think supporting just one band in terms of heritage is enough?
It is enough. We consult with the band leaders, So we consult to find out what it is and where they need assistance. So I'm not sure that we can then intervene and try to force people down a path that they don't want to go down. And I can tell you, from back in the day of 4x4, I'm going back now to like 1990, whatever, 2000. There's always been this narrative and this discussion about feathers and gems against whatever else.
Trevor believes NCF's axing of some costume design competitions has influenced the dwindling of heritage-styled costumes for Grand Kadooment.
This costume, worn by Sophia Chase, highlights the beauty of splendor of masquerade. Made of purple sparkle satin, it features a skirt which encompasses the bottom. Alighting from the middle of the costume is a 6-foot mask, which is made of aluminum and fiberglass. This mask pays tribute to all persons, both alive and deceased, who have assisted in the development of masquerade and costume making in Barbados.
We always used to look forward, my band, Outrage, to the King and Queen because we were one of the dominant bands in that area. But we were told that the participation was of such that the NCF didn't think that we should only have 4 bands presenting King and Queens. So they subsequently withdrew that aspect of it.
He calls for stimulating more interest in traditional costumes among the bands.
If the prizes or you offer the incentives that will bring people to look at the possibility of doing that in their band. And I think that would have been the situation to enhance that sector of the festival.
Trevor is, perhaps, a little outraged by what he claims is even more creative elements being extracted from the Big Kadoo.
We made a retroactive step when we took out this year. There's no more historical section. There's no more topical. There are 4 sections that would have stimulated creativity, and they are no longer in the competition. For that has been squashed too.
Party band leader Richard says,
If we're looking at the big kings and queens costumes, you know, again, we're entrepreneurs. You know, the party bands, the ones who came in after, the veterans, all due respect to Betty and Granny, for those guys, they've done an amazing job. You learn so much from them. But we're really entrepreneurs in this business, bringing creative ideas and trying to find ways to get it to our customer cost effectively. The big mass, the big costumes, if it is going to work, we have to rethink the whole concept. When it worked back in the day, everyone would go to Cohoggle Pot for an event and watch the costumes being paraded and so on. And mark my words, there was money to be made for the NCF. No one's going to sit down these days and spend the amount of hours and time it takes to do these massive costumes with a small chance that they may or may not win a prize.
fellow party man Brian has a soft spot for the big heritage costumes.
Big, huge costumes is missing. Is something that, you know, most other carnivals around the world, you will see big costumes as an attraction in its own, but you can still provide an outlet. I think it's still an outlet for it, even if the judging is not done in the traditional way it used to be. I think there still is a way that they could incorporate the larger costumes back into the festival and have them on the road. I mean, for spectators also watching, it gives the parade of bands a different look when you have a huge costume inside of it. So that's why I grew up seeing as attraction, but it's also expensive for the creators of these costumes too. And therefore the return on that investment is also something that we have to look at. What do these people get back for putting these costumes on the road? So it's kind of on both sides of the scale where you have to have that discussion, the producers as well as the creatives that made them.
Raymond ponders cost versus satisfaction.
With regards to the kings and queens, it's high risk, very little to no reward to produce a king costume where the winner might cover the cost of their costume if they win the first prize, and if there are 10 people in it, means 9 people are going to lose. So it would have to be a pride thing.
For Betty West, the king and queen of the band event made the festival.
The kings and queens, as far as I'm concerned, there was so much creativity in it. You understand? It created a nice spectacle. You understand? And that for me is a big part of Kadooment Crop Over God, as far as I'm concerned. It needs to come back. It needs to come back. Also the cart parade and all that.
Dr. Bab feels for the traditional bands.
The king and queen, I agree with you. I was very sorry when that was disbanded, somewhere in the 2000. I don't remember when that was disbanded. But the reason why that was done away with was because the quality entrants were not good enough to really have a competition at that level.
But she understands the business considerations of the modern bands.
This kind of stuff is expensive, you know. It's not for the faint-hearted. I mean, even the traditional costumes, fabric now is very expensive. And this is why the NCF supports all the bands in terms of giving them a subvention every year. And it is a sizable subvention, and I won't say what it is, okay? But this is very expensive. I personally invest $7,000 to $8,000 every year in a costume that I bring for Kadooment. I mean, this year I'm not competing, but I want to still bring and present a costume because I love this so much. And sometimes my husband said to me, well, what are you doing? But this is my love. This is what I love. So I'm saying all that to say it is an expensive business. So to bring an elaborate costume, if you wanted to bring one of those big elaborate king and queen costumes is anywhere in the vicinity of $40,000 to $50,000. It's not cheap.
Even with NCF's assistance, some bands struggle. The long-standing Power by Four not even convening its band this year.
We made a serious decision. I think I will have to take the blame, because we went again this year looking to do the kind of costumes mixed for overseas and locals, but you know, it's not working for us in terms of being able once again to produce them, the costs and stuff. So we are seriously looking at next year now, going back to our locals.
Chetwin thinks part of the answer is a rebirth of true Bajan mass.
We think it's unfortunate, but you know that Barbados now has more overseas people jumping on the road than locals, and that is not the way we want to go. We want to get more Barbadians on the road. So we definitely have to look now at making it more affordable for locals to jump, and that is what we are going to come with the next year. We want to get more locals in Power by Four. There are enough bands out there, what we will call it the overseas bands, but we need to get more locals on the road. It's our festival, so that is the most important thing. We need to get the locals on the road. And the thing is, when people come from overseas, that is what they enjoy. They enjoy not by themselves, but coming and jumping locals. We have the energy, you know, it's the vibe.
Maybe the expansion of crop over festivities beyond Grand Kadooment might be affecting the big masquerade.
Over the last 15 years, there's been a decline. In 2013, we had 20,000 revelers on the road. In 2016, we had 10,000 revelers. And in 2019, without COVID, we only have 5,000. You know, so there's been a decline. And people like to put blame here and there, but it's a number of different factors. It's not just one thing. It's not just the price of the costumes. You know, it's a number of different things.
Tell me about some of those things.
All right. Now, we've seen the introduction of, you know, for their morning growing, and also the parties, you know, the fetes. The young people that come out every year now is a different thing. When I was younger, you must jump, you had to go on the road. Barbadians know their budget, you know, and now with all the fetes around that time, Grand Kadooment is the last thing. So when the ladies go now and they're doing the all-inclusive, doing 6 or 7 fetes, because of social media, it's 6 or 7 different outfits, you know.
Plus, everyone is backed into a corner for lack of local inputs. Colors Entertainment strives to keep all costume productions at home.
The swimwear is made locally. We're a local manufacturer, and obviously the raw materials are imported, and then we do all of the custom designing and production, as our small unit does.
Okay, so basically you have kept all of your production in Barbados.
Yes.
It's an affair between family and friends, from the corporate band house to Brian's family home.
The costume team is about eight people. We have a couple extra people that will come in later down to assist with things like distribution and certain things, but on a day-to-day basis, about eight of us. It's more of a family unit, close friends that assist us with most of the things we have to do. For supply chain issues, you know, getting the necessary raw materials in time, and then also budgeting is changed. So because the raw materials have gone up, you can't have as much wastage as you could have before. So before you could buy in bulk, and if you're left over with product, it would not be as cost effective on your budget. But now, because the materials are more expensive, you have to kind of buy closer to the amount that you need. So in doing that, you can order a little later. Then with the supply chain issues, the items may come a little bit later. So your team really has to double down to produce in a shorter time.
Richard has no qualms about choosing overseas manufacturers to get the best bang for a buck.
We do rely heavily on international factories for that quality standard and the timeline to be reached efficiently. And yeah, big up China. Big up China. Let me tell you, if something comes better than China, we'll be going there too. Yeah?
So you're not afraid to actually say that you are working with Chinese manufacturers to bring your costumes to the road, as opposed to
local artisans who can reproduce them for you?
No, I'm not at all afraid of it. I mean, look, Beige, we went through this controversy 20 years ago when we first started. You know, we told people that we weren't doing our costumes here in Barbados, we were producing them in Trinidad, and there was this big hurrah, and why on earth we do that? And the reason why we do this is because at the end of the day, it's not about us supporting 5 or 10 local artisans, as we call them, right? What it is about us supporting our economy, driving people to Barbados. The bigger picture, complementing our economy by driving hundreds of people to the country who spend money. Now, when we actually work outside of Barbados, the expertise that returns here benefits the same designers, the same artisans. They can learn from this expertise. And until we have the depth of materials, the variety of materials at the cost that we need to get them at, we'll be going overseas. We can't afford to produce here because it would be simply too expensive.
However, local creatives are not completely cut off.
They're designed here, they're prototyped here. What you see on the stage for the launch are all done here in Barbados. And then we package those and they're sent overseas to reproduce to get back here in time. Where there are things available in Barbados and Trinidad, our immediate neighbors, we certainly go there first. The reality is that for production-wise, we have not reached a level yet where we can produce costumes, mass-produce costumes at a cost and a quality level as being done in China. And when we get there, we will go to strictly locals, you know. So we do try to get feathers and beads, and we use, for example, our wire bender is a Barbadian, or our designer is a Barbadian, but where we got to go to make sure we stay relevant and current, we definitely go.
When we come back, the band leaders talk more about balancing the use of local artisans with their budgets. Local production is priority for Blue Box Cart.
They're done in the basement of our house, which is our band production area. So it's been done there since its inception, 25, actually, I think it's actually 31 years. So yeah, it's all done at home. We produce the swimwear, etc. is produced here locally by Ripples, and then we have a couple of other individual seamstresses that do it, and then we have a group of about 12 girls that come and jewel and feather from beginning to end.
Not everything is made here.
Correct. It's like some of the bras and stuff like that we do have made outside, but the actual decorating and all that is done here.
Sheena stresses that it's not easy.
The challenge is there's nowhere to get raw materials here. So it is extremely challenging to even, you can't say, let me run into town and see if I can find some green jewels for the project I'm working on. Everything has to be sourced overseas. So it does get very expensive.
Betty too is in the rush to import.
We used to get a lot of stuff from Abeds and places like that, but I know why they are not bringing in stuff, because there's only a minority of us that is actually creating stuff here. Majority of vendage stuff is coming from China, wherever one. It's their choice as business people. I'm not criticizing, but this is what I think. Whereas me and people who are working and designing and making stuff here will feel a little pinch of the shoe when we want to get certain things and we cannot get and have to, source it and import it and whatnot.
The high cost of costumes to masqueraders is part of the reality of Barbados's overall heavy reliance on imports. Yes, the bands get government subventions and duty-free concessions. Corporate sponsorship, though, is lacking for some.
There are some brands, some businesses in Barbados that are very supportive of Cropover and of the bands. But overall, you're not getting, right now the businesses are trying to gain more. Before, the word sponsorship meant somebody would give you something where you would benefit. Now the companies are trying to benefit more than you. They're using you as the goat or the horse, and they want to ride you, right? So to me, those how it's working now is way different. It's harder for let me say startup businesses that want to get involved because they're not getting anything out of it.
The NCF want us to put on a show, but every other sponsor you go to, you are told, well, we are doing something with the NCF. I am trying to figure out if they are doing something with the NCF, who is going to produce it when there's no more bands or there's no more creative bands. You will have all of the big bands that have big sponsors or big financiers, and that would be what Crop Over would be going forward.
If you are here to help us and you're going out there to the same sponsors that we're going out there to, that is where the problem lies.
Dr. Bab says corporate Barbados has seemingly lost sight of the costume value to the island's Grand Kadooment.
Years gone by, there was a lot of sponsorship from private sector. Okay? Bands got a lot more sponsorship monies to help with costumes and bands and the same king and queen back in the day. Over time, that really trickled away to almost nothing. And I will say this too, without fear, that in Barbados, we have a different appreciation, or we don't embrace the carnival and the masquerading, say for example, like Trinidad. So in Trinidad, a lot of those big king and queen costumes you see are heavily supported. They get a lot of support from private sector, a lot of sponsorship from private sector. Okay, so they can do that. But here, that's not the case.
With the apparent falling away of Crop Over's traditional mask, the expense of costumes, and the clamor for those costumes that are scant, shiny, and feathery, how do we preserve the uniqueness of our Grand Kadooment among other carnival-type festivals?
All of the colonies and all of the islands have come out of the same struggle. We've come out of slavery. We fought for our freedom, we fought for our own national identity, and so on. There are a lot of similarities when you talk about masquerade across the islands. I am not sure where we are going to be so unique, except to say, so if we say, for example, our Crop Over is made up of not only masquerade, we have food, we have music, we have visual arts, we have culinary arts. All of the arts is all part of our Kadooment. But in terms of the masquerading specifically, I'm not so sure how unique you're going to be.
Dr. Bab pinpoints what Barbados ought to pride its mass on.
What I think we should be focusing on, as a matter of fact, is whatever we do, make it as enjoyable in our Kadooment, in our Crop Over. Make it as enjoyable and safe to our visitors and our nationals as well. And I think that needs to be the focus instead of this narrative I keep hearing about being unique. Because we're not so different from our brothers in the other islands.
Do you think that that is enough still? That Barbados then becomes just another place to go?
Do you really think people sit down and say, well, let me think about what is unique that I want to go to? Do you think that is what they think about? Or rather, what do I want to go to that I really could get a bang for my buck, that I'm really going to enjoy? I suspect, if I think as a masquerader, that person is not going to be sitting down trying to think about what is unique. They're going to go online and looking to see the images of what looks really exciting that I can go and get a bang for my buck. And also in this day and age, safety must be very high on the agenda in terms of people, going to any other location to do anything. And people look on and they want the best or the cutting edge of what they see in terms of, or the majority, I think, and I think I have enough experience, I've been around long enough, I've played long enough to say in different places I've played, so I think I can say that they want what they see as cutting edge in terms of a costume.
At least one band leader is sharing her perspectives.
I think the uniqueness of Crop Over is us, the people, the culture, the cuisine, The fact that we come to Barbados, enjoy an amazing festival, and on one of the world's most beautiful bays, on one of the world's most beautiful beaches. This doesn't happen anywhere else. The Bajan music, the Bajan, again, the food, the whole experience, coming from the street food right up to the fine dining, on the West Coast and so on. Barbados is a very unique spot, and I think crop over is a great way to offer an amazing vacation, but get a huge slice of Caribbean culture and Bajan culture at the same time. And that differentiates. Once we don't lose our Barbadianness, we'll be fine.
And it's the Barbadian spirit that also differentiates the costuming aspect of our Grand Kadooment, Richard says.
Any idea born in Barbados is Bajan. Any idea. Once it comes to the Barbadian's mind, it is a Barbadian idea, a Barbadian concept. And in order for us to compete globally, we have to move the trends. Mass is very much fashion-based, it always has been. And fashions and trends have changed. You mentioned beads and feathers and so on earlier, but actually there are no more beads in costumes. It's all very intricate. When you look at the bras and the swimsuits and so on, it's high fashion, extremely intricate. A lot of jewels and very precious stones and so on are being used. So it's quite an expensive venture, but it's critically required for us to compete with the Trinidad and the Brazils. And even, any creative entity in the world that's doing something crop over in summer, we want to make sure that crop over is the best. And to do so, we have to be current and trendy. So I don't believe that we need to try and in any way go back to where it started. We respect the legacy, but in order to remain relevant, we have to be modern. And again, any idea, any design, any concept that comes from a Barbadian's mind is Bajan. It doesn't have to be about Green Monkey, and Malasali is Bajan.
Veteran Betty, known for leading one of the most accomplished traditional large bands, wants Barbados's mass to stand out.
If I was a visitor and I wanted to go in a band and I go around looking, although most of these bands do better than the people who are doing the traditional mass, I would say, listen, I've seen this in Miami, I've seen this, I've seen this, the bands now have become all feathers and bikini and so on. And so I cannot die a death, because all Barbadians, they like to fall a little bit. So I have to please them. So I put in some feathers, but I fuse it with the old mask and the new mask, you understand? And this is what I do. For instance, like my bottom pieces, I always have something draping down, I have to have that. You'll never see my costume just a bikini with decoration on it. We're all in one. We're all the same. You understand? Just come together and make Barbados a unique place, something different. When people come into mass in Barbados, they say, I go into Barbados because the mass is different. Not that I have seen it here and seen it there before. This is my feeling, I personally think the heritage band should remain as part of our culture, because Kadooment is more than a carnival. It's not actually a carnival. Today they call it carnival. But our style of what we do here in Barbados is totally different.
At nearly 80 years old, she's getting ready to pass the baton to blood that would help to sustain traditional mass.
I wouldn't say they're my staff, they're volunteers. And I'm also training some younger people, to take over when I've moved along. So I have to be there so they could see exactly what's going on.
Regardless of how unique or generic Barbados's Grand Kadooment is, can the creatives, designers, artisans make a living from costume construction? Trevor thinks some local masquerade designers can aspire to earning full-time income from the craft.
In Trinidad, for argument's sake, I've seen people start as normal web vendors, and now all year round, that's all they do. They produce backpacks, headpieces for nearly all of the international carnivals. So why can't we? Why can't we do it as a year-round thing? I think the whole infrastructure of how we are doing it has to change. We have to look at it as not as that season. We will do it for the 5 to 6 months leading up. And then after that, we go back to our regular job, like myself.
but he wonders what they can look forward to at home.
Here you are, you're offering the schools participation, and you're trying to tie certain creative people in to that network to get the kids to understand that this is something we want them to go into, and that it could be a very lucrative career if you want to call it that. And you offer king and queen of the kiddies band. You will see several kings and queens in the kiddies bands, but when they now elevate to the seniors, there's no king and queen.
Chetwynd believes traditional costumes would entice mature Barbadians into jumping for Grand Kadooment, adding more locals to the spectacle.
So there's nothing wrong with the traditional band now coming and wanting to make costumes for people who want to jump in those particular costumes. There's still room for that. A lot of people think there's not, but there's still room for older people to come out. A lot of people let it come out and play, but they're not going to come out and play in some of the things that they see, that say a party band like myself will put out. Because when you look at those costumes, only models can wear them.
He wants traditional bands to complement modern mass.
You need traditional bands to come back or to help the traditional bands. At the end of the day, the party bands, they will survive, and it's dynamic. They will change up depending on what is going and what is, the feathers, the this, the that. But when you talk about traditional bands, I more think about somebody designing costumes for the theme. So if you bring in butterflies, you can see the butterfly wings. If you bring in, you go look at the costume and see exactly what it is. With the party band, you're not going to see that. You can get a name, a fancy theme, and when you look at it, you would just see a lot of feathers. Looking really nice. That is done for the lady.
Betty West Productions intends to forever respond to that charge.
I cater to a certain kind of people, the kind of people who don't want to be half naked on the road. I say half naked on the road. I don't agree with some of it, but every man is to his own liking, and it seems like it's going that way. But whenever you see Betty West, you'll see costume. You'll see ladies covered, because I personally think some of what I'm seeing is like a little bit too much. Like I saw a girl, she should have been in the bedroom, in fact, instead of on the road.
Well, as you've heard, times have changed. We're living in a globalized world, and this is influencing even how we view our own Grand Kadooment and how we choose those costumes. We've definitely been moving away from those big ones with all the fabric, and we want to be able to prance in the little sparkly feathery numbers. But even so, the band leaders who have been leading those traditional bands, they would still like to see our culture, our heritage be preserved with those traditional costumes. And this is something that the National Cultural Foundation actually backs. And perhaps, therefore, there is room for more incentives to preserve the continuation of these traditional bands. Because even the new party bands, they are saying that they don't want to see the traditional bands, the traditional costumes die a natural death. They would love to see both come together so that we have the best mix of old and new mass for our Grand Kadooment, for our Barbadian crop over. I'm Stacey Russell for CBC.